Hello there and a warm welcome to Africa Tonight. Window to your continent. It's good to be back. Thank you for joining us. It's got 9 p.m. Central African time. My name is Audrey Chimwanda. Let's take a look at our headlines. Now, as the world keeps its eyes fixed on political developments in Zimbabwe, the country's expatriates are now eager to return home in the wake of a new era in Zimbabwe. The Ethiopian Supreme Court reduces the prison sentence of activists and the former Ethiopian opposition party Blue Party spokesman Jonathan Tesfaye from 6 years and a half to 3 years. Tesfaye landed in hot water after criticizing the government on his Facebook page. And Zimbabwe declares former President Robert Mugabe's birthday a public holiday. In our top story, the internet cut down in Cameroon's restive Anglophone region is entering its 60th day. Now, this is according to activists that are tracking the shutdown. On September 30th, the government placed restrictions on access to social media networks, such as your Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. Now, this was despite a government statement stating that no such plans were to be implemented. On September the 30th was the eve of a symbolic declaration of independence by the two Anglophone regions. At the time, a heavy security deployment across the region was also in place. Subsequent clashes between separatists and security forces led to deaths, injuries, and mass arrests. Now, this is not the first such disruption in the Central African nation. There was a total blackout in the northwest and southwest regions. It was only lifted in April 2017 after over 3 months. Reports on the impact of such disruptions have shown that the government loses millions of dollars. And the United Nations has also described the move as an act of trampling on freedom of speech and expression. We go to Namibia now. The ruling SWAPO party has elected Hage Geingob as its president. This after he previously served as the acting president. He has been president of Namibia since 2015, but he was acting president of the ruling party. He won 574 out of 766 votes at the party's elective Congress. Namibia's founding father, Sam Nujoma and Pohamba, did not attend the Congress because the two had traveled to neighboring Zimbabwe to witness the swearing in of the new president, Emmerson Mnangagwa. SWAPO started out as an independent liberation movement formed in 1960. It has been Namibia's only governing party since independence in 1990. The party won the last general elections in November 2014, winning 86.73% of the votes and 77 out of the 96 legislative seats. We go to Zimbabwe now, where the police and the army are staging joint patrols as the country returns to normalcy after an army takeover that led to Robert Mugabe's resignation. Here's a report.
As Zimbabwe gets to normality, police and the army will patrol the streets of the capital, Harare. This follows reports of looting, vandalism, and illegal occupation.
Law enforcement agents are already receiving reports of looting and illegal occupation of other people's properties, particularly farms and houses. This behavior is criminal and against the spirit of non-vengeful retribution and will be met by the full wrath of the law.
The country's defense forces took charge on November the 14th in what they say was a move to remove criminals surrounding the then President Mugabe. Mukwisi sternly warned those who had committed crimes during the crisis when police numbers were under strain.
You will soon notice the ZDF and ZRP members conducting joint patrols, especially in the Harare Central Business District. We urge you all, progressive Zimbabweans, to respect the country's laws.
Zimbabweans of all political and racial backgrounds thronged the streets of the country's 3 major cities in protest against Mugabe's rule. The 93-year-old president resigned last Tuesday after his party expelled him and parliament began proceedings to impeach him. His 37-year tenure was marked by accusations of rights abuses, electoral fraud, and economic ineptitude. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Now, in South Africa, where Zimbabweans are the largest migrant community, the diaspora celebrated Robert Mugabe's resignation, and most of them fled unemployment and the economic crisis, but they're now considering returning back home to Zimbabwe to help rebuild the country. Let's take a look at this report.
Many Zimbabweans found freedom and work across the globe during Robert Mugabe's oppressive rule, many of them living in neighboring South Africa. Now the dream of returning home seems almost within reach.
Everyone, as I speak, the world over, they are confident that minus Mugabe, there is a glimmer of hope. So I'm confident that whoever is going to take over from now onwards, he has learned a lesson from this guy. I don't think it's highly unlikely that he will repeat the same mistake.
After nearly 4 decades in power, Robert Mugabe resigned last week following a military takeover. The majority of Zimbabweans had only known life under Mugabe, the world's oldest head of state, under a rule defined by brutality, rigged elections, joblessness and international isolation. His successor, Emmerson Mnangagwa, known as the crocodile for his ruthlessness, has promised jobs and more jobs.
Everyone like us who are here in this diaspora, we don't like to be here. We like to be in our place of origins. We got children whom we are growing here, whom we grow up losing our culture. And this is a very intensified issue that Comrade Mr. Mnangagwa, he have to restore all of these things that I'm trying to say here.
The rebuilding of a new prosperous Zimbabwe will require a collective effort. With a new president and renewed hope for the future, the prospects of Zim reclaiming its title as the breadbasket of Africa now seems attainable. Expelled farmer Mike Woodendal says most farmers are now looking back to reinvest in Zimbabwe.
We are looking at probably investment in Zimbabwe. I think I'm too old to sort of put new roots down. I put roots here now after losing everything in Zimbabwe, and I think we've got to look further and more astutely and rather invest in Zimbabwe if we have to, but not move back there.
With unemployment now sitting at 27% in South Africa, daily work has become hard to come by. Many of those living in South Africa were once teachers, bankers and merchants. They now hope to return back to Zimbabwe to use their skills to better the once thriving economy. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Now you're at home, welcome to joining the conversation that we're about to get into. Our Twitter handle at ANN7TV. Would love to hear from you. Our phone number is 011-542-2186. We have our lines open. Go ahead and give us a call and tell us if you're a Zimbabwean that is living and working in South Africa, what is your reason to stay? And if you want to go back home, what is your reason to want to go back home? For now, though, allow me to introduce to you in studio, I have Last Batsirai Shadaya and Francis Godo. Both of them are expatriates. They're working here in South Africa, and we'll find out what is making them stay here. Of course, we know what is making you stay here. Gentlemen, welcome to Africa Tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, we're playing a video clip a few minutes ago of some Zimbabweans who are saying, look, we're ready to go back home to help build the country. Does that sentiment resonate with you guys as well? I'll start with you, Francis.
I think in the immediate term, I would say no, because there's still uncertainty in terms of where Zimbabwe is going. Yes, we're celebrating the end of Mugabe era, but in terms of the economic outlook, development, it was going to take time to bring Zimbabwe where it was and where it's supposed to be. So in the immediate term, I would say no. But in the long term, yes, we'd love to go back home in the long term. But in the immediate term, I would say we need to wait and see the policy that the incoming president is going to introduce.
Batsirai, any confidence that was instilled into you by the now President Emmerson Mnangagwa in his inauguration speech? He spoke about how we need to rebuild Zimbabwe, the policies that he mentioned as well, opening up Zimbabwe for business to the world. As you know, all of us here are expatriates. I'm also Zimbabwe. I understand the country had become quite a pariah state. Do you feel any responsibility to go back home and make a difference at this point?
Well, certainly, Audrey, this is a very good time to be a Zimbabwean, especially a young one, because we have these avalanches of hope that's filling our hearts. But to make the decision to go back cannot be an emotive decision. We have to look, there are certain processes that have to precede this decision. Yes, the president, the current president now, President Mnangagwa, has reiterated the need to rebuild the country. And yes, as a young Zimbabwean, I have the responsibility to rebuild my country as well. But in terms of economic policies, we now need to know where we stand. In terms of democratic policies as well, because the politics of the country has been very bad for the last 37. So we now need to know where are we going from here.
Yeah.
Are we going to see a repetition of the same system? Because mind you, these are the same people. So we now need direction and clear leadership as to where exactly the country is going before we make the decision to go back, which we already want to.
Yeah, and it appears the euphoria seems to be dying down now that we experienced happening in Zimbabwe. I don't know where you gentlemen were, but I was in Zimbabwe. I was right there when, you know, the change with regards to, obviously, the presidency happened in theory. But I'm just curious to hear from you guys. Where were you when it happened? You spoke of not making emotional decisions, but what went through your mind when you heard that President Robert Mugabe, having been in power for so long, is actually going to relinquish his power, Francis?
For me, I was here and I watched the whole thing on TV. I was excited that it's a new era, that the president was going to resign and the new system was going to come in. I was excited. But at the same time, I knew that the incoming president is still the same old system. So my excitement was just the end of the Mugabe era. But the incoming president is still part of the system that was there 37 years ago. So we are excited, yes, but we also need to be cautiously optimistic to say what is going to happen with this new Zimbabwe. Because the challenge is on the president to say, is he going to introduce new blood, new people, technocrats in his cabinet? So the question is, in his cabinet, is he going to introduce the technocrats and the new blood? Is going to bring the old people who were there, the Chinamasas and everyone? Then it doesn't bring hope to us as Zimbabweans in the diaspora. So the excitement really has to do with saying President Mugabe has gone, who has presided Zimbabwe over the past 37 years, and Zimbabwe had gone down under his leadership. Yeah. So the excitement was really predicated on that. But the hope now for tomorrow was not really on the basis of him having resigned. So I think those are two separate issues. We are celebrating the end of the regime.
And I think this is what Zimbabweans were trying to explain to the world.
Yes,
like, we understand your concerns, that it's the same system that is in power, so to speak, so we can't really be, you know, overexcited. But I'm just curious to hear from you, gentlemen, the role of the army. You guys are well-educated. Yes. You are both engineers and, you know, your intellects. Do you have any concerns with the role of the army that they took, you know, in the past few days and in the future, today?
Look, Audrey, to be honest, in a perfectly ideal environment, no one would want the army to intervene in the way that they did. But everyone else realizes, especially Zimbabweans, that this was not an ideal environment. It was an environment that was surrounded by categories of a few people who had selfish interests, who did not care about the direction of the country, about the general citizen. And at some point, something had to give. And unfortunately, it was the army which gave. We understand fully well the concerns that usually if you see tanks on the streets from the military, at some point they are going to come down.
Yeah, it was absolutely a huge scare. But I'll ask you to hold on to that thought. We have opened our phone lines to our viewers. We have Brighton from Johannesburg on the phone line. Thank you for joining us. What are your views or concerns?
Good evening, Zimbabweans. How are you?
Very well, Brighton. It's actually the whole continent that's watching and those that are watching us via live stream. But please go ahead with your point.
Yes. No, the thing is, like the question was said, are you ready to go into Zimbabwe?
Yes.
I say yes. But we are not just going back to Zimbabwe. Just not just a way to going back to Zimbabwe. First, you must ask yourself, why are you here in South Africa?
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes.
Because others, they just said they're here for political issues. Others, they're just running. Maybe they've got some problems which they did in Zimbabwe, which is not political. You understand? So if you are going to Zimbabwe, what are you going to do? What is your plan for you to going back to Zimbabwe?
And Brighton, why would you stay? Because if I'm to understand your sentiments right now, to say, look, I've been here for a long time, you're probably established in your business or in your career, probably have a family that, you know, that the only place they know is South Africa. Is that your reason for staying? And would you ever consider going back home?
Yes, like me, I've got a big company here in South Africa. But now, I'm planning now to establish that company in Zimbabwe, because home is the best no matter whatever. But now we want to see what is the new government going to do to us. You understand?
Yes.
Yes.
Brighton, thank you so much for sharing your views with us. We certainly appreciate it. Brighton joining us on the phone line from Johannesburg. He's a Zimbabwean who's been living here and working in South Africa. So he's ready at some point to go back home and start his business there. We have a female voice today. We have Melody Mbayiwa on the phone line. Melody, very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. What are your thoughts on the issue of Zimbabweans that are living here, whether they should go back home or not? What is your stance as an expatriate in South Africa?
Hi, how are you?
Very well. Please go ahead, Melody.
Okay. The first thing that I would like to look at is, like the other caller said, why did we come here to South Africa or to wherever we went to? And the fact that some of us, we came to gain education and experience and to actually see and also to become, to enrich ourselves and, raise our families and all. And the fact that now we have gained a new era, a new independence, no matter how short it may be, because we don't know actually the policies, whether they're going to be implemented in the right way and the way that we expect. But anyway, going back to Zimbabwe, it will actually be to go with the knowledge that we have attained here in South Africa, not just for ourselves, because I would like to remove that selfish attitude that we have, that you gain knowledge for yourself, but that we gain knowledge to enrich others, to improve our communities. And I know that the knowledge that we have attained here in South Africa and the experience and the way of life actually, and the way they do things is actually will be beneficial to our Zimbabwean compatriots.
And Melody, I'm just curious to hear if you'll be prepared to go back home to vote. I understand the registration process has happened. Were you a part of that? And are you trusting the electoral system in Zimbabwe without any reforms that the opposition has been calling for? We saw what happened in 2008. Does that instill any confidence in you as the electorate?
You know what? I still believe in the electoral vote, because in 2002, I voted. 2008, I voted. And with all those, we got results that the party that I voted for, I'm not going to mention, won. But it's just because of the electoral reforms that now, everything is just coming out that they rigged in this way. But yet, when we're in Zimbabwe, we got the result and we knew which party won.
Right, Melody, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your contribution. I certainly appreciate it. Melody Mbayiwa joining us on the phone line from Johannesburg. Bring the conversation back into studio. Gentlemen, what do you think the new president needs to do to get the, a fresh start, or rather a kickstart to the Zimbabwe economy? With this talk of infrastructure being a part of that program, but what else do you think he perhaps missed in his speech when he tried to really woo and sell Zimbabwe to the world? Francis?
I think you're looking at his speech, it was quite inclusive. He tackled all the important areas in terms of economic development. But I think also he could have added the issue of reconciliation in terms of things that happened in Zimbabwe. As you know, Zimbabwe is quite fragmented. There's the multiple-land issue, the Gukurahundi issue. I think he should have at least said something along those lines to bring the nation together, because we need a united Zimbabwe, we need a united nation. So that's exactly what he should have also have highlighted, that issue of integrating the nation in terms of the tribes, so that we can actually come together. So that's the issue in terms of the tribes, to acknowledge the wrongs that were done and to bring that closure to those issues. I think people are willing to move on as long as the leaders acknowledge. That's the first thing. Then in terms of economic development and infrastructure, he touched on the very, very important issues. But what we now need to see is the action. We now need to see, he spoke very toughly on issue of corruption. So we want to see those things happening, not really a selective application of justice.
I mean, we have been seeing the arrests that are happening, the finance minister being arrested, something that should have never thought would happen in Zimbabwe, his bail being denied today. But again, people are saying this is selective.
In my opinion, it is quite selective.
Yeah, but
it might actually show that, yes, I acknowledge that Chombo was quite corrupt. If you look at the properties that were shown on TV that he owns, it really shows that he was corrupt. Yeah. But I believe there are so many other ministers who also in that situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Well.
I don't think there's two people that brought the country down to its knees. But today, let's get back to get into the conversation as well. The issue of social cohesion, the issue of Gukurahundi seems to be coming back up into the surface again. You know, it is something that has been, Zimbabweans have kind of walked on eggshells around it and really not dealt with it the way that it should have been dealt with. What do you think the new president needs to do going forward? Also, people saying he was quite active and involved in the implementation of Gukurahundi, as atrocious as it was.
Well, Audrey, I think the issue itself is quite sensitive, but we as a nation have never gotten ourselves into a position where we have decided to tackle it head on. And I think it is high time, if we are saying we are moving into a new Zimbabwe, we cannot move into a new Zimbabwe by ignoring such important issues. So I think we now need to open a national dialogue to discuss exactly the events that happened. Because for most of us who were actually not yet born, we only know there was Gukurahundi. We don't know what really happened. We don't know the events that led to the Gukurahundi itself. We don't know who was involved, to what extent were they involved. So all these things, they now need to be brought under a national discussion. And you mentioned as well the issues that the president might have left out in his address, which was important. I'm just going to touch on a very controversial economic policy that was there under President Mugabe, which is the issue of indigenization and empowerment. It is an issue that has affected negatively the investment in our country, and I think he needed to highlight his take on that issue, because if we continue with such policies, we are not going to attract investors. And investment is such, investors are so important. You look at countries that are like America, big as they are, they talk hard on attracting investors. So a small country like Zimbabwe, which has been marginalized for the longer part of our independent economy, cannot afford to have policies that are adverse to investors. We cannot.
Well, I think the president said, I think he was speaking to the Chinese some time back when he made an official visit there, that Zimbabwe is some 15 or 20 years behind when it comes to development. That alludes to the fact that I suppose he is aware of how far back Zimbabwe is. I'm just curious to know, before we end our conversation, gentlemen, how long have you been living in South Africa for, Francis?
For me, it's quite fresh. It's less than 1 year since I've been here.
Oh, so, yeah, that is.
So that's why my answer is strictly no in the immediate term, because I'm still quite new. And I'm looking forward to enjoying my stay and learning before I go back home, probably to do consulting work. And because I can't go back home to look for employment.
Right.
I can only go back home to invest and be part of the new Zimbabwe.
And Basirai?
Well, I'm in the same boat with him. I think I've been here for a year. And I've really liked it. One thing that I like about countries that are politically stable and democratic is that they allow people to flourish regardless of where you come from, your race, your gender, your nationality. As long as you have skills to offer, the economy is also something to offer for you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We certainly appreciated you coming into studio and discussing this. And I certainly wish you all the best in your endeavors, be it here in South Africa or back home in Zimbabwe. A huge thank you to our callers as well, and to those who engaged on Twitter. Unfortunately, I couldn't read all your tweets, but I certainly appreciate you being a part of the conversation. Well, still with Zimbabwe, they have made the former President Robert Mugabe's birthday a public holiday. Zimbabwe's The Herald newspaper reports that moving forward, February 21st will now be known as the Robert Mugabe National Youth Day. The move follows intense lobbying by the ruling ZANU-PF Party's Youth League. The declaration of his birthday as a holiday is the latest of many accolades. The country's biggest airport was recently renamed after the veteran politician who ruled Zimbabwe for nearly 40 years. Zimbabwe's School of Intelligence was also named after former President Robert Mugabe. It is a $1 billion US project, and I suppose it will be going ahead. It's still in the works, and several buildings and roads across the country have also been named after the former president. In other stories now, we go to Ethiopia. The Ethiopian, I beg your pardon, Supreme Court has reduced the prison sentence of an activist and former Ethiopian opposition party, that is the Blue Party spokesman, Yonatan Tesfaye from 6 years to 6 months and 6 months to 3 years. Tesfaye was charged and convicted of associating with a terrorist organization. This after he criticized the government on his Facebook account. The reduction follows arguments by his defense attorneys that he should not have been prosecuted and convicted under the anti-terror law and should appear before a common law court. The Addis Ababa Federal Court has also accused him of colluding with the Oromo Liberation Front, that is a rebel armed group. Well, that's a wrap for Africa Tonight. Thank you for watching to all our viewers across the continent. My name is Audrey Chimanda. Have a good night.